If you want to open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 25 or Luke chapter 2, either one will suffice. We're going to look at both. Or if you want to look at, open it to both at the same time, feel free. But we're going to start in Genesis chapter 25. Forgive me, I have a cold that I'm working through, and I have as much medication or medicine in me right now as you can possibly put into a person's body. To be able to get through a teaching time, and so I'm doing that, and I make no excuses for what I'm about to say because I can't wait to speak about what God has on my heart. But the way it comes out with coughs and stuff like that, give me grace, please. So we're going to dive into this this morning. So glad that you're here with me as we look at this series, Christmas Collision. Genesis chapter 25 is an amazing chapter that has a lot of little nuances in it. And this is going back several thousand years ago, where really the first patriarch in Israel would be Abraham, where God calls Abraham and says to Abraham, you're going to be a father of many nations. And then he has children, Ishmael and Isaac, and there's a lot of conversation in and around Ishmael and Isaac. But then Isaac has two sons as well. Isaac gets married to Rebecca, okay, good, just seeing if you're paying attention. You're like, I don't know what that means. Okay, so it's Rebecca, and then they have two children, and they're twins. And it's a fascinating conversation that you see Rebecca having with God, and then afterwards you see the life that they begin to live out together. So in Genesis chapter 25, you see inside of her is these two babies. They're twins. She couldn't have children, and they prayed that God would open up her womb, and then she was able to have children. And so then Rebecca has these two twins, and while they're inside of her body, they're fighting. You understand what being in sibling rivalry is? You understand that, right? And fighting with your brother or sister? For some of you, the holidays are all about that. You're like, I can't wait for the holidays because we're about to fight, you know, and maybe that's how it goes down in your place. It's not how it goes down in mine, but I've seen that firsthand, and different siblings get together, and it's like, oh, it's a war. That's how these guys were while they were in the womb. Prior to them even being introduced to each other, prior to them even understanding that they lived or were alive, they were fighting with each other. And so Rebecca prays to God and says, God, tell me about this. Why is this going on inside of me? Could you imagine, ladies? Like, could you imagine the fist comes out and, you know, your belly's like this and, you know, and you're like, the aliens are inside of me. What's going on? And anyway, that's how I read the text. And so, you know, I read with imagination. And so she prays and says, Lord, why is this happening to me? And this is in verse 22. And the Lord said back, 2 nations are in your womb. And the 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Doesn't necessarily answer the question, but says, hey, this is just the beginning. They are stuck together, and they're not going to like each other too much. This is going to be a problem for forever. And so that's what's going on there. And then so she gives birth, and verse 24, we can read this because it's kind of comical, actually. It says, when her days, and you can picture this yourself, I'm not going to elaborate. It says, when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were 2 twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak. So she called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, which is interesting. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in the tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So you see, you've got Esau, who's a man's man. He went out hunting and did those kinds of things. He was a hairy, burly kind of a guy, and he was dad's favorite. And then you have the other, Jacob, who's a mama's boy, right? He stayed home and you know, he cooked with mom and cleaned with mom and all those other things. And he didn't like to go out and get all dirty and stuff like that. And so they were opposite from every vantage point that you can see. So then you see once in verse 29, once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field. So this is what Jacob does. He's like a chef cooking with mom. He's cooking a stew. So Esau comes in from the field, and he was exhausted. Do you know what it is to be exhausted? At the end of working and you've worked a 10, 12, 14, 16-hour day, you come home just totally wiped out. And you're just like, I'm done. I got nothing left. And Esau says to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. And in parentheses, therefore his name was called Edom, which means red. Jacob said, this is fascinating. Jacob's a conniver. This is who he is. He's a deceiver. This is the way he works things out. He's a manipulator. So Jacob says, sell me your birthright now. What's a birthright? We don't have a birthright today. That's not what we kind of do in our culture. But in that culture, the birthright was given to the oldest. It was the dad's blessing on the oldest. And so they would take and they would have kind of the majority of the land or the majority of whatever. It was the thing that was most respected in the family, like you got this. And it would be the guy that would be in charge of the family after dad's gone. And there's a lot that went with it. We don't know exactly what it was for them, but this was a big deal. But to Jacob, who's the not firstborn, he's the secondborn, even though they're born probably the same day or around the same time, twins, Esau's the oldest. So he's the one who has his rights to the birthright. So Jacob says, sell me your birthright now. I'll give you this cup of stew. I've been making it all day. Come here, smell this. This is good stuff. I put the best of the best in here. And he probably put some stuff that Esau hunted the day before, and he just had a bad day. I don't know. And so he says, sell me your birthright now, and I'll give you this food. Verse 32 is interesting. What would you do? Would you sell something like this to get a meal? It's a big question. Because here's what Esau says about it. Esau said in verse 32, I'm about to die. I'm starving to death. You catch that, right? Has your kids ever said that to you? I'm starving to death. What's in the cabinets? And they're scouring through the kitchen and they're trying to find some food. And here's Esau. I'm starving to death. I'm about to die. Is he really about to die? No, he's not. He's just really hungry. He's probably a big guy, and he's used to eating all the time, and this is the way things go for him, and he's used to getting what he wants when he wants is more than likely how this rolls out. And he says this. This is fascinating. He says, "Of what use is a birthright to me?" This thing that you're negotiating for, and I would imagine this is not the first time Jacob brought this up. I think that he probably wore him down to this point where he's like, you know what, this is worthless anyway. And at this point in time, as I study out the life of Isaac and Rebekah, it would seem to me that they weren't so rich. Not yet, but in the future they would be. And at this time, it would seem to me that they were in a place where they're just kind of living like in intense and in a kind of nomadic kind of a lifestyle, not in their own land, and things are kind of okay, but not going great. So for him, he would be looking at this birthright, looking at whatever his dad could give him, and he would say, well, this is kind of a waste. Maybe they had a little bit of money. Maybe they were middle class with some debt. I don't know. But he would look at this and say, this is pointless. This is what value is this? And Esau, he's a man's man. He doesn't need your help. He doesn't need dad's help. He doesn't need a birthright. I can do it myself. Men, you get this? I don't need to ask for directions. I got this, right? And we kind of do that in a lot of life, and Esau's right there, where he's like, hey, I got this. I don't need my dad's blessing. I don't need all this. And maybe that's what he's thinking. But through this, he says, of what use is a birthright, this thing in the future that I'll get, what use is this to me? Essentially, Esau is stuck. You understand what it is to be stuck, right? I'm stuck right where I'm at. I'm stuck in this life. I'm stuck being hungry. I'm stuck looking for a meal. I'm stuck in this place. I'm stuck where I don't want to be. And that's where Esau is. And the only thing I have to look forward to is this crazy birthright. That has no value anyway. Who knows if mom and dad are ever going to turn out to have any kind of inheritance. Jacob said in verse 33, swear to me now. So he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. Good move or bad move? Well, it depends. It depends whether you value the birthright or not. Verse 34, then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and rose and went his way. Thus Esau, and in the original language, this is a very intentional word. Thus Esau said he despised his birthright. That word in the original language of the Hebrew, is to say he counted it worthless. It was just a piece of paper. It was a whole bunch of nothing. Like, who cares about this? This is a waste of my time. So he counted this totally worthless. And we would look at him and say, how stupid can you be? Because we look back through the lens of history saying, do you realize what you gave up? And we would call him dumb or stupid or what a waste. But see, here's why. He gave up on his future. But how many of us have given up on our future? Let's be honest here. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with those around you. How many of us have given up on our future through one angry conversation? You just let it rip and you didn't care anymore. You counted that relationship worthless by what you said. You counted the future of that relationship worthless by one kiss or by one adultery or by one thing that you did outside of that relationship. You counted that lifestyle worthless and you just said, I'm done with this. And it didn't matter if you studied for it. It didn't matter if you planned for it. You were just so frustrated and so fed up and so tired of being stuck where you are that you said, I don't care about the future. I want to resolve this stuckness today. I want out. I want freedom. I want to get rid of this. It's one smoke. It's one high. It's one drink. It's one shot. I see it all the time, and you do too. And I see it in my life. And hopefully you can see it in yours too. Where there's times where we, out of being stuck and tired of being where we are and can't take it anymore, there's that fight or flight mentality where you fight and fight and fight till the fight's gone and you say, I've had it, I can't stay here any longer, I'm tired of this relationship, I'm tired of this financial thing, I'm tired of this, and you just say, I'm done with it, I don't care anymore, I'm going to let you have it, I don't care what my future, how it affects my future at all. That's where Esau was. He counted his future worthless, the birthright in the future worthless. It was empty. It meant nothing to him based on what he could get today. We spend like that sometimes, don't we? I'll buy this. I know I can't afford it. I won't be able to pay my bills. I count my future worthless by what I can get today. All because Esau was stuck. And I'll say this, being stuck is a powerful thing. It's so powerful that many will do whatever they can to get out of being stuck. And that's all Esau did. He was tired of being stuck, and he wanted to get out, and it didn't matter what it cost him. I just have to get out of being stuck. Well, Mary and Joseph know all about being stuck. Matthew or Luke chapter 2 is where we're going to jump next. I bring up Jacob and Esau because it's brought up several times what Esau did there as a foolish and unwise thing for us to learn from. And it's all because he was stuck and just did what was impulsive. And I believe that we all are impulsive at different points, and it's a struggle. So what do we do with it? Well, in Luke chapter 2, it's fascinating because Mary and Joseph, they get this whole thing of being stuck. They get this understanding of what it is to have your life kind of put into this container where you're just in holding self for a little while or a long while. They get it because the rest of their life is going to be stuck. In Luke chapter 2, Luke chapter 1 actually is where we're going to be starting. And this is a review of what we're talking about. I'm kind of jumping on a few highlights of the Christmas story, we'll call it. because there's so much application within this. We look at this as a Hallmark kind of a story with a wonderful ending, and I look at it and say, I don't see it that way. To me, this is a Christmas collision that we can learn from. And so here we see Mary and Joseph, they had their life totally wrecked by God's announcement that they are going to have, they're going to be the parent of Jesus. Could you imagine this as a teenager? Maybe they aspired for something bigger. Maybe they aspired for something great with their life. Maybe they're looking and saying, man, I got big dreams or big aspirations. And at that moment when God said through the angel, hey, you are going to be the parents of Jesus, their life is absolutely wrecked. It was a collision course for what they had planned for themselves. And so this is where they find themselves. Luke chapter 1, verse 38. I just want to read this again because it's so powerful. It says, and Mary said, after the angel had talked to her and said, hey, here's what's going to happen, and she didn't get it, and she's like, this is weird. And in verse 37 it says, nothing will be impossible with God. And so Mary's response to the angel, when the angel says, listen, here's what's about to happen to you. Your life's about to be wrecked. As she's got 1,000,001 things going through her mind, there she sits with the opportunity to respond to the angel. Which direction is she going to go? And so she says in verse 38, behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. It's a position of submission. It's a position of I'm willing to go through whatever you have in store for me. And I can only imagine what she would be thinking at that moment. Let's process this. This is prior to her knowing what Joseph is going to think. Would Joseph be willing to marry her? Big question, don't you think? She's stuck. Wait a second. I'm going to be pregnant with the Messiah. And this guy, Joseph, I really like him. I don't want to mess things up over here. This is going to really, this is going to mess everything up. If he finds out, he will find out. There's no way he can't find out. Is he going to stay with me? Is he going to be okay with this? This changes his life as well. What are my parents going to think? I've got to walk out of my room and I've got to tell my parents, hey, listen, an angel just talked to me and just said I'm going to have Jesus. She's got to tell her friends. Would you do that? Instagram or Snapchat? Which one? I don't know which one you'd do it on. I don't think you would. Right? So she literally is at this point where she had the freedom ahead of her, the life ahead of her of, I'm going to be married. I can't wait for this great day. I found this awesome guy, Joseph, or maybe he was appointed just for her, whatever it is, and I can't wait for this. This is going to be exciting. This is going to be great. To now, it's all been taken away from me. I'm stuck. And she says very clearly, let it be to me according to your word. Whatever you have, listen, if this is God's plan for me, I'm good. It would seem a little bit brash, a little bit crazy to respond like this to God. She simply surrendered all of her plans and all of her aspirations to follow God. She's willing to be stuck for the rest of her life. It's not a temporary thing. This is a permanent thing. This is a game changer for her entire life. Much like Esau had a game changer for the rest of his life, this is the opposite, where Mary had an opposite move where she's going to have her life changed forever, never to be the same. Now, I would say her life is wrecked in human terms. So to make things worse, as if that's not bad enough, So Joseph then, as we talked about last week, the angel appears to Joseph, and Joseph says, all right, I guess we're still on, and we'll still get married, and this is going to be odd and different, but we'll still get married. And so they do, and as they go through this process, they have to register, and so they have to go to this town of Bethlehem. Is this a good place or bad place for them to go to? If you're a teenager and you've got to leave your home where mom and dad are taking care of you, and you've got to go to this place that you don't know about, you can't check the reviews on the internet because they don't have an internet yet, right? They can't phone ahead and make some plans or reservations. They can't do that. So they're just going to go to this place and hope to find the best place they can find, right? It's a good day for them. Can't wait. So they go, they leave home. And in chapter 2, it talks about them. They had to be registered in his own town. And so Joseph, in verse 4, Joseph went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. Now, the story, in just this tiny little verse, it gives this journey that they had to take from here to here. Their whole life is uprooted. Maybe he lost a job now. I don't know what happened. But all of everything that they had been building, at least to that point, is gone. And now they're in this town called Bethlehem. How were the accommodations, by the way? Let's look at this. This is so fun, right? You know this story. I've seen this. This is so cute. The kids do this play, and they dress up just right. And, Mary and Joseph, they're really clean, and they have this thing that they made just right. It has hay that's never been used before because we bought it down at the store, and it's just perfect, and we just lay the hay in there, and you put this fake little baby in it, or maybe you have a real baby, and you put it in there, and the baby's going to cry, and it's going to be wonderful, and and oh, it's so precious. It's a Hallmark moment. And then it snows because it always snows at the end of Hallmark movies. I don't know. Usually that's when I wake up at the... Oh, sorry. Anyway. Terrible, terrible, terrible. It says, and while they were there, the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to the firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. So they go to the inn, probably the only inn in town. I don't know, maybe there's two. But go and they try to find a place to stay. They try to find a nice room. Wouldn't you if you're Joseph? Hey, we got to find a nice place. My wife's about to give birth. Don't you care? The rooms are booked, buddy. There's nothing I can do. There's got to be a place. She's about to give birth, and I can't do this, and I got to have a place. Well, you know what? The cattle are out in the field, so why don't you just take where they're going to stay overnight? And I'll push them in. I can make room for you there in the stable. How good does this sound to you? Ladies, you hear? You get this? Yeah, you in love with your husband now? Man, great job, Joseph. I love the accommodations. This is so wonderful. The hay they put out 3 days ago doesn't smell bad at all. They cleaned it up just perfect for us. I'm sure everything's sterilized just right for me to have this child. Right. Wouldn't you say that they're stuck? There's no television to watch when you're bored. There's no internet to go on to find out what you're supposed to do next. There's no cell phone to call someone and to say, hey, guess what just happened? And there's no chair to sit on to be able to be comfortable. There's no bed to be able to lay on to be able to get a good night's sleep. There's nothing there but hay and stinky stuff. Right? If you were Mary, wouldn't you feel a bit stuck? This is less than the best. This is less than good. This is not good at all. I can't stand where I'm at. And maybe that's where you are in life today. Maybe you could totally relate to being stuck. This is not where I want to be. This is just a stinky, stinky place that I just can't stand being in. And too often, I think we're anxiously awaiting to get unstuck, and we need to be careful not to move ahead of God, very simply. There's a lot of people that get stuck being in this place where God has them, when you page through the Bible, this is what you find repeatedly. Last week we talked about Joseph. Joseph got stuck for years in what? In prison. He got stuck there, not for a day, not for 3 days, not for a week or a month. He got stuck there for years. What was God's plan in this? I'm just stuck. What kind of life is this? It's wrecked. Moses got stuck leading a bunch of people that he didn't want to lead and that didn't want to be led by him. It's fascinating. With Joseph, God redeemed that and saved the world through him, through the famine that was going on. God used it. God redeemed it. God knew what he was doing. It's fascinating with Moses that God led Moses while Moses felt stuck, and he says this at different points, like, God, why did you choose me for this? I didn't want this. He made all kinds of excuses. He was totally stuck where he was. And at the end of it, what you find is that God used Moses to bring people out of slavery to do something that was incredible and to prepare them for the promised land so that we can see all kinds of things about Jesus Christ through his life and through the things that are going on then. Israel gets stuck in the wilderness, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, not for 5 years, but for 40 years. And if you track what Israel did and you see where they walked, they did circles. That's like New Jersey, man. You go down to Camden County College and you got those crazy circles. You could go around those for days. Like, I don't know how to get out, And maybe that's not the right one, but there's other circles that you feel that way. Right? And that's where Israel is. They're walking around and they're like in circles and circles. Moses, you know where you're going, buddy? Following God. For 40 years, they were stuck in the wilderness until the time that God chose for them to move forward. It was a time of faith building in the next generation. It wasn't for that generation because that generation had already failed. And the next generation needed their faith built so that God could take them into the promised land. They could cross over. They could go and walk around Jericho. Could you imagine that? That was the smallest stuckness that I could see people having. Here's the next plan. Joshua says to the people of Israel, we're going to beat Jericho, and here's how we're going to do it. Game plan. Walk around the city of Jericho. What's next? Do it again. Okay, what's next? Do it again. What's next? Like, this is ridiculous. Joshua, you sure you're talking to God? Because this is the weirdest plan I've ever seen. On the seventh day, we're going to walk around how many times? Yeah, 7 times. And then at the end of that, we're going to shout. And what's God going to do? Yeah, he's going to knock the walls down. It's in his power to do it. When they feel stuck, just walking, just pacing themselves and just being quiet. And, okay, we're going for a walk again. Da-da-da. Right? They're stuck. But God shows up. Daniel, here's another short one. Daniel gets stuck in the lion's den for 1 night. Why? Because he was a man of faith, a man who prayed. And so they threw him in the lion's den. And I love what God does. God shows up and he takes the lions and he says, hey, listen, they're really comfy to sleep on. So here's a nice bed. This one's going to curl around you just right. You could spoon with a lion, whatever. And that's what he's doing that night. And the king gets up the next day and he calls down for Daniel. Daniel, you in there? What's Daniel do? Daniel is stuck in a lion's den, but God is greater than the lion's den. And through that, there's all kinds of redemption, and God's faithfulness just shows up. And you fast forward through, and you see the world is stuck waiting for a Savior, and then Jesus shows up and uses all kinds of signs to show that he's here. It's as if, let me just read into this a little bit. Don't you see this with me? It's as if God intends for people to get stuck. I don't like it so much. Do you? I want out. Don't you? I wanted out last week, last month, 10 years ago. Why did I ever do that? I'm stuck. God's like, I know. I've got a greater plan for you than you are even aware of. So while they're stuck, and while we're stuck, and maybe you're stuck in school, like I just went out of high school, I went out of college. Maybe you're stuck in a relationship. I went out of this relationship. I can't believe I married them. I can't believe I said yes. Or maybe you're stuck without a relationship. Man, it'd be nice to have somebody to argue with. I don't know. You're stuck in financial pressure. You're stuck in the dead-end job. You're stuck with kids, stuck without kids. You're stuck in the wrong neighborhood. There's all kinds of things to put in there, isn't there? God knew that Mary and Joseph would be stuck. Just like Esau was stuck, here's Mary and Joseph that are stuck. And he knew they would be stuck. And while they were stuck, look at this. Don't miss this. This is incredible. While they were stuck, while they were removed from everything that they knew and loved back home, while they were in a stable that stunk and it was nasty, and no one here would even want to sit down in a stable, she's giving birth to a child. While they're there, don't miss this. God shows up. Could you imagine just for a moment what it's like to hold Jesus for the first time? I'm holding the Son of God. We could miss it, couldn't we? But God shows up right there. While they were stuck, they were experiencing the best the world has ever known. Isn't that cool? That is so encouraging to me. While they were stuck in human terms, they were experiencing the best that God has ever given. This precious little child. Wow. In Luke chapter 2, verse 19, you find she gave birth to this child, and it's as if the movie the camera pans over to the shepherds that are in a field nearby. And for some crazy odd reason, go figure this. Why did God do this? I don't even know. He sends the angels to deliver a message to shepherds. Why shepherds? I don't know. And so there he is, sending these angels, and they declare to the shepherds, hey, guess what? There's this baby that's born. This is my son that's being born, and they're just over here. And so what do? And we talked about this a little bit last week, so I'm not going to review everything. So they get up, and they walk over to where Mary and Joseph are. And they come to the stable, they come to this place, and they see the baby laying in a manger, just like they said. So this had to be very close to the point of birth of Jesus. I would say minutes or hours, sometime in that range. So they come to this place and they see Jesus in the manger, just as the angels had said. And they say in verse, they go over and they say in verse 16, they went with haste and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. And when they saw it, they made known the saying that had been told to them concerning this child. And all that heard it wondered at what the shepherds told them. But Mary did this. She treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart. She treasured these things. And if you miss everything today, here's what I want to share with you. When you feel stuck, look for the treasure. When you feel stuck, look for the treasure. Here's what Mary did. The shepherds come in, and they're saying, this is what the angels just told us. And she just sits there, and she's just like, wow, this is an incredible thing. So in the original language, this word here in the Greek now, in the New Testament, it's written in Greek, that word to treasure is to intentionally remember the event that just happened. Have you been there? Maybe it was an engagement, or maybe it was this party, this celebration, or this championship where you just say, I'm just taking this in. I'm going to treasure this moment. I don't want to forget what just happened here. And that's exactly where she is. She's treasuring. She's saying, I want to intentionally remember what has just happened here. Do you realize that God did not have to send the shepherds? He did not have to send the shepherds. That wasn't something he had to do. He did that simply for Joseph and Mary. And I think that Mary and Joseph, they simply needed this boost while they were stuck. She could have, let's be honest, if she were like you and I, she could have been complaining the whole time. The shepherds come in and, oh man, more people in the room here, just what I needed. This is so embarrassing. My hair's a mess. It smells. This is just nasty. I can't believe somebody else showed up. And oh, do you see how things are? You see how Joseph's treating me? He's a lousy to-be husband. Right? That's how the story could go. She could complain, whine, and be frustrated and irritated, and she would have every, in our sense, right to be there. Essentially, as I see it, God is saying back to them, yes, you are stuck in this place on purpose. You're exactly where I want you to be. I didn't want you in the stable over here. I didn't want you in the room upstairs. I wanted you in this stable with the baby in that manger. Yes, you feel stuck, but I know it, and I want you to be there. To treasure is exactly what she did. And to treasure this is to intentionally remind herself. Is to intentionally make this effort to remember what God has done. Listen, if you leave your heart to itself, it's going to complain and whine, right? When you're stuck in traffic, what do? So glad I'm going slow today. Man, so glad she's driving 30 and a 50. This is great. Listen, how many of you, while nobody's in the car, you're talking crazy to that person in front of you and they can't hear you? Right? We don't do stuck. Okay, maybe it's just me. When we direct our heart to treasure what God is doing, we're able to see truth. We're able to see through all the dirt and the grime and the grease and the stink to be able to see truth. And I don't think we're great at this. I actually think we're pretty lousy at this. Not as a criticism at you. It's at me. I think this is one of the things that we all need to be challenged with. When we're stuck, what we do is we get frustrated, annoyed, and irritated, and irritable, and grumpy, and it's a bad day, it's a bad week, it's a bad month, it's a bad life. That's normal. It's acceptable even. And we don't stop and say, this is God's appointed time for me to be in this stinky stable with the baby in the manger. God did this. God wants this. He wants me to be stuck so that I would treasure him, because in my stuckness, I see God showing up. I don't think stuckness is a word, but I made it one. So here's what I want to do. I have this crazy idea that's kind of borrowed. To be a church that celebrates milestone moments. You see, I think that we should be a church that treasures what God does when God shows up. So I have a vision for 2019, not like a vision like I slept and I saw this vision. That's not it. I just have this idea, I guess, for 2019 that looks like this. That we would take this jar, or maybe it's not this jar. Maybe we'll come up with a better jar. This is just one I stole out of the back room. I'll put it back so it's not stealing, it's just borrowing for now. So you can pray for me. Don't have me over your house. I might steal jars there too. Anyway, my passion is that we would celebrate and treasure the things that God is doing. Period. If we just show up to show up and attend church, then we've missed out on the transformation that God wants to do in us. Did you catch that? So what I'd like to do is that maybe in this jar or one like this, I don't know, we'll figure it out. The creative people, they're going to figure out the jar, okay? But I'd like to start this in a month from now by having a milestone celebration day. So you can begin praying, planning, preparing for this, that this is not going to be about me. This is going to be about you, church. What milestone is God doing in your life? What milestone in 2018 has God done? And what can we celebrate together? Where were you stuck and you saw God show up? What transformation did God do in your heart and in your mind? And so what I'd like to do is, just like Israel did, they took stones and they laid stones out and they celebrated these stones and they were remembrance for what God had done. I'd like to take stones and maybe write your name on it and maybe a one-word statement that summarizes the treasure of God's transformational work in your heart. Does that make sense? And then we'll put it in the jar so that we can remember how great God is. And when we fill up one jar, I'd like to fill up another one, and another, and another, to the point that we see the move of God, because I assume, I expect, and I know God is working. I know he's working in me, and I believe he's working in you. I would love to see over not just one day, but over years, there to be jars all around this room filled with rocks, and the guest comes in and says, "What's with the jars with the rocks?" And we say, "Oh, let me tell you about this. These are our treasures of the milestone moments where God did a transformational work in me and in them. And we get to bring God glory through it." I'll share more details as we go. But that's what it is to treasure. Where Mary is totally stuck right where she is. She's just hanging out in a stable in the manger, and she's like, "Oh, man." And the shepherds come in, and she just says, "Wow, I can't miss this. God's doing this. God put me here." Romans 8:28. If you want to turn there, you can, or maybe you know this one. If you've been in church for a while, you know this text. You know where I'm heading. Romans 8:28, the Apostle Paul, who had been through a lot of different things, he knew what it was to be stuck. Matter of fact, most of his adult life, I think he spent in prison for telling people about Jesus, and he went through all kinds of different things. He says this in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. All things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose." And he goes on further to describe this process. But he says this, and I want to just highlight this. All things work together for good. It's that God is working. God is working and working and working and working on you and working on me and working on us and working and working and working. It's that it does not stop. It's something that he began to do at the moment of our conception, even prior to that, and he continues to do through our childhood, through our adult life, all the way through our entire life. He's working and working and working and working, not for bad things, but to do good things in us. It's as if he says, "Hey, listen, I've got a gift for you. I know you're in a tough relationship, but this is my gift. I know you're stuck, but this is my gift to you. I'm giving this to you." Why? Because in that, I show you my grace, I show you my mercy, I show you how great I am, I show you how faithful I am. And in that, you'll learn to see where you're self-centered, and you'll learn how to grow in me. You say, "Yeah, well, that's not mine." Okay, well, he's giving you this gift. Yeah, I know you're financially challenged. Here's your gift. "I don't have any money, God. I can't even pay my bills. I'm really having a hard time. And my gift," like, really? And God's like, "No, this is good. I'm working in you. I'm working in you. I'm working to show you diligence like an ant goes and it continues to do what it's got to do without anybody telling it what to do. I'm working in you to show you my faithful hand of how I'm going to provide for you in that moment of need." "Yeah, but God, my health is bad." You're going to consider that a gift? Yes, it's a gift. I gave that diabetes to you. I gave that pain in your body to you. I gave that to you so I can show up in you. It's a gift. I'm working in you, and I'm working, and I'm working, and I'm not quitting. That's what God says. So even when we feel stuck, Even when we're at that point where like, I got this fight or flight, I want out, I want to be gone, or I'm just going to fight, I don't care. God's saying, I've got you right where I want you. It's okay. This is good. I'm working, and I'm working, and I'm working. This is my gift to you. Could you imagine Joseph and Mary looking at this manger and seeing a bow on Jesus' head and saying, this child that you're going to have to figure out how to buy groceries for, this child that you've got to go buy the diapers for and change his diapers, and this child that you weren't ready to have yet, and this child that changed all of your relationships, and this child that just changed every dynamic of every future plan that you had, this child is my gift to you. Because I'm working in you. I'm working in you. And this is good. Let's pray. Lord, it is so hard to see your good gifts when we feel stuck. Lord, would you open our hearts to you? Show us your grace. Show us your mercy. And guide us, I pray. Lord, help us to be like Mary, that we would treasure, that we would intentionally remember the good things that you're doing in our life. To celebrate you, not us. Lord, we give you praise this morning for all that you have done and all that you will do. And it's through Jesus I pray. Amen.